since we've been talking about Islam. What is a Hajj? What is a Hajj? The word we used an awful lot before in our Middle East unit. All right, Hayden, what is a Hajj, sir?
A Hajj is a giant cube that people worship in.
It is not actually going to be that. It's part of their
Oh,
faith. There will be worship done while doing your Hajj, but good try. It's been a
yeah.
while, so this is why we're doing this little review ski. Let's see. Let's go with the Raj.
The fifth pillar of Islam.
The fifth pillar of Islam, where you do what, Nora?
Where you make a trip to Mecca.
Bravissimo. Was that what you're going to say, Eli and Joel? Wunderbar. Okay, glad everybody is smarty pants. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Mansa Musa doing the fifth pillar of Islam, the pilgrimage to Mecca. But let's get there and talk about how Mali starts first. All right, Ghana declines. We talked about this last time we were together. We have this terrible war between Ghana and the Almoravids. The Almoravids came down from the north and they said, convert to Islam or die. And the people of Ghana said, no, thank you. Let's fight. So they fought and Ghana wins the war. However, remember, Ghana is spending all of this time worrying about the war as opposed to protecting their trade routes. And we know that people broke away from Ghana. Now, I'm never going to ask you what people the Mali was. They were the Mandi people. I'm not going to ask you that, though. They started south of Ghana. And as Ghana is breaking apart, they say, hey, we can start asserting our own authority. So they become independent. They start going and growing. And they are going to take a book from Ghana, or excuse me, a play from Ghana's playbook, and they are going to go and say, you know, Ghana got really rich. Like, Lydia just had to sit there and tax people while Veronica went and traded her gold and salt. Let's do the same. And they did. And then they became very, very wealthy. So they become wealthy from trading, from controlling the from controlling the gold and salt trade. I'm sorry I can't speak today. They would tax everyone. Also, just like Ghana, when London found a gold nugget, she had to turn that in to the government. And then Jackson would grind it down into a powder, and then, of course, he would keep some of that powder. London now can use that gold powder to go buy things. Plus, we know that Jude also used salt for a currency. So we see it's just like Ghana, the economy. So they are using gold dust that's gone and collected from taxes, and when it's found, it's given to the emperor. They're using salt as currency. It's just like Ghana. We're going to see tremendous similarities between the two. Now, when we get to one guy, Sundiata, he is going to take the title of Mansa. Mansa means emperor. So when I say Mansa Musa, it's not his first name. This would be Mansa Sundiata. And then later on, we're going to talk about Mansa Musa, Emperor Sundiata. And he's going to conquer a bunch of land. You don't have to write this down, though. That part right there. You just need to know that Mali is going to be once a part of Ghana, but now it is its own thing. But it's just like Ghana with how it controlled the gold and salt trade. All right? And the Mansa was the ruler. Cool thing, we talked last time about how Ghana, which was right about here, has really nothing to do with present-day Ghana, which is right here. But nice thing is, medieval Mali actually is where Mali is today. So this right here is Mali's borders. And so we see about 2/3 or a little bit more of medieval Mali is in present-day Mali's borders, which is always nice because that makes sense. And now we get to the main event, the piece de resistance, Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa is awesome. He's going to be the most famous ruler from Mali, and he's probably the best ruler Mali ever had. And he's really only known for the one thing, but he does a lot more than the one thing. We'll try to go shed some light on that. But he was the first devout Muslim African leader. And this is going to be a big deal. So we talked about how Islam had been in Africa, particularly West Africa, since we had the Arab merchants coming in the 700s to 800s AD. And some Africans converted to Islam, many did not. Some Arabs moved to West Africa and continued to practice Islam. Well, over time, Islam is going to become more popular, but for many, it's going to be a cultural thing. They're just Muslims. For example, there are people who might be like, oh yeah, I follow this faith, but they don't actually do anything of it. It's just part of their culture. Whereas some people, actively pursue following their faith. Everybody's different. Mansa Musa, he actively pursued following Islam, which is going to be unique for the rulers at the time. And because of that, he had to follow the 5 pillars of Islam, which he is going to go on his Hajj to Mecca, and he is going to do it with style. So he is going to show off to the whole world how awesome Mali is in this Hajj. And so when he does it, he's going to bring 60,000 people with him. 60,000 people. This is a gigantic entourage. This is humongous. This is larger than almost all the armies that would be fighting at this time. So he brings 60,000 people with him. And here's what he does. It's like a parade. Now, how many of you have ever been to a parade? Like maybe the Kris Kringle parade in Frederick? Now, isn't it great when you go to a parade and they're like throwing candy out at you and stuff like that? Isn't that wonderful? Well, Mansa Musa one-ups this. He's not throwing candy. His servants are going out to the crowd and saying, Nalea, here's some gold. Celeste, here's some gold. Yeah, they're giving out gold as gifts. And here's the thing. No African kingdom had been on a European map prior to Mansa Musa. Like it said Africa. And like really it wasn't like shaped because they didn't know what it looked like. They had like North Africa and then kind of like they had no idea really what was going on south of the Sahara. Arab maps would maybe have like Africa in shape, but they didn't have any of the names on it. Well, after Mansa Musa's Hajj, like we sing in our song, puts Mali on the maps, it does. Literally everyone's like, all right, we need to put Mali on the map so people can get there so we can get their gold. Like everybody wanted to trade with Mali after Mansa Musa does this because they were like, these guys are so stinking rich. They're literally giving away gold. They have so much of it. It's like that easy for them. So Mansa Musa takes 60,000 people on a Hajj to Mecca. You don't have to write the things on this slide right here. But he's got 80 camels, each carrying 4,000 pounds of gold each. He's got servants with all of these pure staves of gold. And so as they're going around, they're going and giving out this gold. They get to Cairo, Egypt, the present-day capital of Egypt. They give so much gold in Egypt that they crash the economy of Cairo. And here's what I'm trying to say here. Typically back then, people made very, very little money. Almost no one had any money, okay? Like if you're a rich person, sure you had money, but 99% of populations had none, always. So we could say that maybe, just maybe, Rachel would get $10 in her entire life. That's if she saved everything she ever got, all right? Not very much money at all, right? But for a regular person, that's just how it was. Mansa Musa's servant gives her a piece of gold. Let's pretend it is worth $1,000. Is that incredibly rich for Rachel? Now, I have a question. Prior to this, Rachel worked every day, probably 12 to 14 hours, doing back-breaking, terrible work. All right, Rachel, you hate your job. I'm so sorry, honey, that you have to suffer through this. Is Rachel going to want to go to her job the next day when she'd get like half a penny for like a week's work when she now has something worth like 1,000? No, she is not going to want to go do that job because she doesn't need to do that job because now she's incredibly wealthy by her standards. So what happens is this happened to so many people in Cairo that no one wanted to work because what are you going to give me, Eli? Like you're paying me nothing essentially. Like I'm not going to work for you because you have nothing to give me. And so Egypt's economy grinds to a halt. It's actually a huge disaster because what happens is since everybody has so much gold, gold actually loses its value. Because it's one of those things, no one wants it if they already have it. Like Eli would have to pay Rachel so much to get her back to work. And it's like, but because, if her whole lifetime she's only going to make like $10 total and she has something worth 1,000, like how much are you going to have to pay her to actually go back and do this terrible stuff? So Cairo's economy crushed in it. But he does more than just go and do this Hajj. Everyone only knows him for his Hajj. He goes and makes Timbuktu an amazing city. While he's in Mecca, he goes, meets some foreign architects. I believe they're Spanish. They were also doing their Hajj. He brings them back to Timbuktu. He builds universities. He makes Timbuktu the center for learning, for trade, for education. Everybody wants to go to Timbuktu. Essentially, like we talk about these important cities for Islam. Baghdad is going to be an incredibly important one, although by this time the Mongols have destroyed it, so scratch that off the list. We've got Cordoba. We've got Timbuktu. It's kind of crazy because now Timbuktu is like a punchline. When I was your age, I used to watch Bugs Bunny cartoons, like Looney Tunes, and like one of the jokes would always be like, he would go trick Elmer Fudd into getting in a box, and then he would go, nail the box shut and send it to Timbuktu. Because for us, Timbuktu is like this example of being out in the middle of nowhere. But at one time, it was one of the greatest cities in the world, and they built all these mosques. One thing we're going to talk about next year, because 2020 is almost over. I love that. I love saying how we're going to do something next year, but it's like only like 2 weeks from now. We're going to talk about how Islam is going to change, and we're going to talk about that later, though. But we're just going to see animist ideas are coming in. All right. So let's end Mali now. I know we just got to Mali. We just talked about its greatest ruler, and now we're saying au revoir. So Mansa Musa dies. I know. Same mistake everybody keeps making through history. I don't know what's up with people and just choosing to die all the time. But he does. And he was one of their great rulers. Unfortunately, they didn't have great rulers following up after him. They couldn't live up to him. Now, truthfully, perhaps giving away so much gold hurt Mali. But, the rulers just didn't work out after him. And Mali is weaker. But then, just like how Mali copied Ghana with their economy, the way they tax the gold salt system, they're also going to copy Mali's downfall. A North African group, for Ghana, we had the Almoravids, and for Mali, it's going to be a group called the Berbers, which the Berbers still exist today. The Berbers come down, and they attack Mali. Now, Mali battles them, but as Mali fights, they lose control of the trade routes. Then they lose money. Then they have less soldiers, less land, less money, less soldiers. The reverse circle of awesome that we had before. And what happens is Mali loses its territory, kingdoms break away. So next week when we get back together, we're going to talk about Songhai, which is going to follow the same arc, rising up, controlling the gold salt trade, and actually, surprisingly, falling to another North African invader. So that's our note. So I'm going to end the recording right now. And does anyone